Korea was one country for over 1,000 years. One language, one culture, one people. Then in August 1945, two American Army officers sat down with a National Geographic map and drew a line across it. They had 30 minutes. Nobody asked the Korean people. And that line, drawn in half an hour, has divided a nation of 75 million ever since. This is the decision that split Korea in two. For generations, the peninsula functioned as a singular political and cultural entity, anchored by the Joseon dynasty, which governed from the capital of Hanseong for over 5 centuries. This unbroken continuity shattered in 1910 when Imperial Japan annexed the peninsula, initiating 35 years of severe colonial subjugation. The occupation systematically stripped the population of their sovereignty, outlawed the Korean language in schools, and forced citizens to adopt Japanese names. Yet, the cultural identity survived underground. When Imperial Japan collapsed in August 1945, the immediate expectation across the peninsula was not partition, but the natural restoration of the unified state that had existed for half a millennium. An entire population prepared to rebuild their sovereign country, unaware of the external forces already deciding its fate. Late on the night of August 10, 1945, inside a cramped office in the Pentagon, two junior officers received an urgent directive. The War Department needed an immediate proposal for occupation zones before Soviet forces, already moving through the north, swept across the entire Korean peninsula. Lieutenant Colonel Dean Rusk and Colonel Charles Bonesteel were given roughly 30 minutes to complete the task. With no detailed military charts of Korea available, they consulted a single civilian wall map published by the National Geographic Society. Tracing the peninsula, they looked for a line that would keep the capital city, Seoul, under American control. They settled on the 38th parallel north, a latitudinal line that split the landmass nearly in half. No Korean was present in the room, no Korean was consulted. This arbitrary line, drawn in haste on a magazine map, went up the chain of command. To the surprise of American planners, Moscow accepted the proposal without a single counteroffer, turning a half-hour administrative placeholder into the foundation of a permanent national split. Soviet troops quickly established control across the northern zone, immediately setting up a command structure aligned with Moscow. To govern, they bypassed local committees and elevated Kim Il-sung, a young Korean communist who had spent years fighting Japanese occupation forces from exile in Manchuria and the Soviet Union. To the south, American military authorities arrived to find a highly fragmented political environment. Hundreds of competing local factions, nationalist groups, and committees vied for influence in the post-liberation chaos. Seeking a reliable, anti-communist anchor to stabilize the territory, the United States consolidated its support around Syngman Rhee-chi, a conservative nationalist who had spent decades in Western exile. These parallel occupations did not just install different administrators, they imported two entirely incompatible systems. Without consulting the local population, the occupying superpowers selected rival leaders who held diametrically opposed plans for the country's future. Long before separate states were formally declared, this foreign selection of leadership began turning a temporary military boundary into a permanent political reality. In 1948, the provisional administrative zones dissolved into permanent sovereign states. On August 15th, the American-backed Republic of Korea was formally proclaimed in Seoul under Syngman Rhee. Less than a month later, on September 9th, the Soviet-backed Democratic People's Republic of Korea was declared in Pyongyang under Kim Il-sung. Neither government recognized the other. Instead, both claimed sole legitimate authority over the entire peninsula. With the departure of occupying forces, reunification was redefined as a total victory on each regime's own terms. The 38th parallel, once a hurried, pencil-drawn line on a magazine map, hardened into a heavily fortified international border. Travel between the zones was banned, Separate currencies were issued, and local skirmishes broke out along the latitude. A 30-minute temporary placeholder drawn in a Pentagon office had become a permanent militarized fault line, ready to erupt. At dawn on June 25, 1950, North Korean forces launched a massive artillery barrage and ground assault across the 38th parallel, led by Soviet-built armor. Seoul fell in just 3 days. In response, the United States mobilized to intervene under a newly formed United Nations mandate. General Douglas MacArthur engineered a rapid counteroffensive, driving Allied forces northward and racing toward the Chinese border. This rapid advance triggered an immediate escalation. 300,000 Chinese troops surged across the Yalu River, throwing the coalition back in a brutal winter retreat. For 3 years, the front lines ground back and forth in a war of attrition across the peninsula, reducing entire cities to ash and ruin. Roughly 3 million people died in the conflict, the vast majority of them civilians. Yet, when the firing stopped with the signing of an armistice in July 1953, the new frontier was established almost exactly where the war had begun. The massive destruction of human life had produced virtually no geographic change, leaving the split precisely where those 2 American officers had drawn it on a magazine map 8 years prior. The 1953 armistice silenced the guns, but it failed to produce a peace treaty. Today, the 2 Korean states remain technically at war, divided by the demilitarized zone. Running roughly along that original latitudinal line, this narrow corridor stretches 160 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. It is the most heavily mined and fortified border on Earth, secured by millions of explosives, concrete walls, and standing armies. Across this line, the partition created a system of radically unequal realities. South Korea rose from extreme post-war poverty to become the 12th largest economy in the world, a democratic giant of trade and high technology. In stark contrast, North Korea remains locked in absolute isolation, totalitarian repression, historic famine, and nuclear weapons development. The temporary administrative boundary drawn in haste by 2 American officers in 1945 has hardened into an unyielding wall, separating a single people into 2 completely different worlds. Beneath the economic statistics lies a quiet, generational estrangement. In 2000, a rare inter-Korean summit allowed a select group of aging relatives to clasp hands in brief, heavily monitored family reunions after more than 50 years of silence. Almost 2 decades later, at the 2018 Winter Olympics, athletes from both nations marched together under a single, unified flag. Yet these highly publicized events remain fleeting exceptions, passing quickly while the physical division remains absolute. Every year, the generation that personally experienced a unified Korea before 1945 quietly disappears, taking the living memory of a single homeland with them. In their place, decades of complete isolation have caused the shared language to diverge, while distinct cultural systems reshape daily life on either side of the parallel. For the children and grandchildren who inherit this division, the border is simply the ordinary baseline of existence. They grow up as citizens of 2 entirely different countries, inheriting a geopolitical split they did nothing to create. What began as a hurried 30-minute decision on a magazine map has outlived its creators, permanently hardening into a lived reality where brothers have become strangers. Today, that arbitrary line remains the most heavily militarized border on Earth. A makeshift compromise has hardened into a permanent tragedy, freezing millions in a state of perpetual silent war. The true cost isn't just how the line was drawn. It's that we still live with the consequences.